America always abandons its friends and its best proxies. Sooner or later, it will happen this time too. That is what recently said Dmitry Medvedev, one of the Putin's major flunkies and current deputy chair of the Russian Security Council. And guess what? It seems that a new report on Ukraine by Rand Corporation provides Biden's government with the justification to do just that. In a remarkable about face, the Rand Corporation, a longtime advocate for U.S. escalation against Russian aggression in Ukraine, an influential U.S. government finance think tank on global policy issues, has published several days ago a new report insisting that the United States is not serving its interests by continuing to actively aid Ukraine in its war of defense against Russia. U.S. interests, Rand writes, would be best served by avoiding a protracted conflict. The costs and risks of a long war in Ukraine are significant and outweigh the possible benefits of such trajectory for the United States. To help us understand this turnabout, we invited one of the world's leading analysts of the conflict, Dr. Yuri Felshtinsky, to Chicago Jewish Cafe. In his two books, Blowing Up Russia, and one of the most recent books, Blowing Up Ukraine, Dr. Felshtinsky predicted Russia's war against Ukraine and explained better than most other analysts Russia's motives behind it. Yuri, welcome to Chicago Jewish Cafe.
Thank you very much.
Yuri, I hope you had a chance to see this Rand's paper that I just referred to, the paper which tries to answer the question, how does Russia's war against Ukraine end? What can you tell us about it?
Well, I've seen the report. I do not agree with it. I should add, of course, there is no a single reason given in this report which actually would support the conclusion. And I think it's also wrong to see the United States as a country which abandoned those who, fight together with it. And I think they probably thought about the withdrawal of the American troops from Afghanistan, which we've seen, on TV many times. But let us not forget that there were two world wars in the world recently, the first one and the second one. And in both cases, those wars were won because America chose to participate. And in a period when America choose not to participate. And this is a period between the First World War and the Second World War. Europe actually ended in a major war, the Second World War. So to believe that the United States should not be part of a major European war developing in Europe today, and a war between Russia and Ukraine, one way or another, is a major European war, is wrong from any point of view. And I'm not even talking about a moral point of view or political point of view, but it's extremely dangerous for the United States to leave Russia alone in Europe and allow Russia to destroy Europe. Because the war which started on 24th of February of 22 is not about Ukraine. It's not about Ukraine the way the war of Hitler against Poland was not about Poland. And we know this from history. And we actually know this from many speeches which Putin gave starting 2007, indicating that he is dreaming about recreation of the Soviet Union or another Russian empire or a different kind of Russian empire, but of an empire. So for Putin, this is not a war about Ukraine. This is a war about also the Moldova, which is so far independent. We should not forget that Putin actually occupied Belarus in 2021. So he's planning to proceed, and he will proceed into the Baltic states, which are part of NATO, if he is allowed to take Ukraine and Moldova. So the only way to stop Putin is to stop him in the Ukraine. And in the beginning, when the war started on 24th of February, no one actually could predict that Ukrainians would be able to hold Russia. Now this is 11 months war, and not to allow Russia to proceed further. And in a situation when Ukraine is fighting and fighting successfully, to help Ukraine is an obligation, but this is not a charitable obligation. This is not out of charity. This is because this is in the interest of the United States to have independent Europe and to have
I understand it, but my question is this: why Rand Corporation, which was for the whole year firmly against Russia and for support of Ukraine in every possible way, why did they suddenly change their attitude? I mean, this paper starts with the title of this paper, avoiding a long war, meaning not winning the war, not punishing Russia, not bringing it back to its starting borders, but just simply avoiding a long war. Why?
Well, I do think that this is a mistake to think this way. I think I hope, sincerely hope, that this has something to do with one person's opinion and not with the opinion of the Rand Corporation as the institution. But this, the only connection which I see, and I actually, hate to say this, but the only connection I see is probably between Trump and his influence and Rand Corporation. And we know that this is a point, that's what Trump is thinking, right? That's what Trump would plan to do, to withdraw from this war. But we also know that Trump would withdraw from NATO, that Trump would leave Europe alone against Russia. And there are certain explanations, which I have, why Trump would do this. There are also people who are trying to connect the withdrawal of United States from European affairs and the potential problem with which the United States might have with China. But even from this point of view, it's in the interest of the United States to have free Europe and powerful Europe, and Europe which is part of NATO, and Europe which is friendly with the United States, even if the United States plans to have a conflict or expects to have a conflict with China. So from any direction, from any point of view, even if you are sincerely thinking that the strategic enemy of the United States is China and not Russia, and I do disagree with this, but even if you think that the strategic enemy of the United States is China, you need to have a victory in Ukraine over Russia as quickly as possible and as powerful as possible. So there is literally no good reason for the United States to allow Russia to take Ukraine. This is just an impossible way of thinking.
I would imagine, that they mentioned China as one of the reasons, to cut the war in Ukraine short, as they say it, moderately short or whatever it is. They see no way out at this point, but they hope that somehow it will be the war will end in some kind of a settlement. But and because they said that the United States should pay more attention to China, but in my mind, if the United States is gonna lose in Ukraine in defense of its freedom, then United States will have no chance confronting in any way China. China will become, like Russia, will become even braver, even more obnoxious, even more militaristic.
Well, let it put it this way. First of all, if the United States isolates itself from Europe, it weakens itself from military point of view, specifically in relation to China. There is no question about this. But let's come back for a second to the Ukraine. When this was started, and it was started by Putin on 24th of February, it was unprovoked. It was a pure case of aggression of a major state, major European state, Russia, against a smaller neighbor, Ukraine. Everybody was dreaming from day number one to finish this war as quickly as possible and to end this war as quickly as possible. And there is nothing wrong in wishing to end the war in Europe as quickly as possible. And this desire to see this war to be ended in Europe came through different stages. When the war started, everybody expected Ukraine to be taken by Russia in a matter of 1 week or 1 month. And I have to say that probably major partners of NATO, countries like France, countries like Germany, less so in the United States, were kind of hoping, and I stress hoping, that Ukraine would capitulate and this war would be over in a week or in a month. This did not happen, as we know. And the war developed into a real war. And then, again, everybody was hoping that this war might be ended through negotiations, that somehow Russia and Ukraine would sit at the table, that Russia would present the list of demands, like to allow Russia officially and finally to have Crimea, to allow Russia to have certain regions of Ukraine like Donbass, etc., etc., etc. And this war would end through negotiations with understanding that Ukraine would lose some of its territories to Russia. Again, this did not happen. This already did not happen. It did not happen for two reasons. Both of them are important. One, because Ukraine refused to give away a part of its territories. Second reason, because Putin does not need part of the Ukraine. Putin needs all Ukraine. He would like to have the entire Ukraine. And in addition to this, again, I have to stress, he would like to have the entire Moldova as well, and the Baltic states as well. So this is not about Ukraine for Putin. This was never about Ukraine for Putin. But because of this, we already passed a phase number two, a phase when everybody was hoping to end this war through negotiations. Now we came to the next phase, and this phase is to end this war through the victory over Russia by the alliance. And that's what's going to happen. And that's why Germany finally decided to allow German tanks to be delivered to Ukraine. And that's why France already decided, instead of calling Putin every week, asking him for negotiations, to give green lights for their tanks, because we already moved to a different stage in this war. It's clear to everybody, including the United States, including the Congress of the United States, including the White House, that this war would never end through negotiations. This war now would end only through the victory of Ukrainians slash NATO over the Russian Federation. By the way, I still do not believe that this war will end within the borders of Ukraine. In other words, I still do believe that there is a risk of spreading this war further into Europe, starting with the Baltic states. We see that after 11 months of difficult struggle for Russia, when Russia lost, by all calculations, between 80 and 100,000 people killed, and this has to be multiplied for wounded, of course. Russia is not demonstrating a single indication to us that they are ready to stop this war. They are ready to reconsider what happened on 24th of February of 22. They are not actually ready for any compromises. Indeed, the rhetoric is becoming more and more aggressive. Russia is blackmailing the world with using nuclear weapons. Russia is claiming and stating that they will mobilize additional troops. So far, we have approximately 320,000 Russian troops in Ukraine, and Russia plans to mobilize more, somewhere between 180 and 250 additional thousand troops. So altogether, Russia is ready to have a 500,000 strong army fighting in Europe. Now, the rhetoric change, it started in February of 22 as the war against Ukraine. Now what Russia is saying, they're fighting against NATO. And that's precisely what's happening. Russia is not waging this war as the war against Ukraine. From the very beginning for Putin, this was war against NATO, with plans to rebuild the Soviet Union, with plans to change borders of 1991, even maybe to change borders of 1918. To reestablish influence which the Soviet Union had over Eastern Europe. So this was a very ambitious plan, and everything went wrong with it just because Ukraine started successfully to fight, because Putin could not understand one very simple change which happened in Europe after 1991, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, that Eastern Europe does not want to go back under Russia's control. I mean, this would never happen. That's why we see Ukrainians are dying for their freedom. That's why we see Poles helping Ukrainians. That's why we see the Baltic states helping Ukrainians. Those countries, including Poland and the Baltic states, would never go back under Russia's control. And that's what was difficult for France and Germany to understand in the beginning, because what was happening was a kind of irrational, the way Ukrainians were ready to die, the level of the struggle was basically irrational from that point of view, because both countries, France and Germany, have, of course, different history and learn different lessons, right? So,
Yuri, I'm sorry. How do you see this war ending?
well, this is a question for which, honestly, no one has the answer now. One of the reasons why we do not have an answer, because we do not really know if nuclear weapons might be used. If nuclear weapons are used, then we will live in a different world, because no one knows, including Putin, what's going to happen after the first nuclear weapon is used against Ukraine or against Eastern Europe. So we have to remember that Belarus, which is, again, for practical purposes, occupied by the Russian Federation and is under Russian control, but technically speaking, Belarus is an independent state. Belarus was withdrawn from non-nuclear status in March, in the very beginning of that war, in March of 22. Lukashenko stated several times, the last time recently after Putin visited Minsk, that they will start to deploy nuclear weapons on Belarus plains. And if this happened, then Belarus would have ability to strike with nuclear weapons against Eastern Europe or Europe. And since Belarus is an independent state by rules which, everybody was discussing since 1945, you would not respond to this strike against Russia. You would respond with this strike with a strike against Belarus. So this is a tricky situation, and if Belarus is used by Putin as a ground for staging nuclear strikes, this will change many things for Europe, and this will change the course of this war.
In what way? In what way? Let's say Putin does use a tactical nuclear weapon. First of all, I do not see where he can use, because now he's having, like you said, 500,000 troops concentrated in eastern Ukraine, and he's planning probably taking Odessa. I mean, if I were a Russian general, Donbass is good, but cutting Ukraine from Black Sea access, that's what is the most important for Russia.
Well, there might be different views on what direction would be the most important. I still think that the most important one is direction to Kiev, and that's why I think the Russian troops are going to be moved to Belarus once again, and we will see the second attempt of the Russian Federation to take Kiev. I do not think that this attempt will be more successful than the first one, but you are not able to proceed with this war unless you try to take Kiev again, and Kiev is the capital of Ukraine. Odessa is important for two reasons. Number one, you are right, it's cutting Ukraine from the sea, but there is even more important reason. Our Russian troops are trying to create a land corridor to Transnistria. This is a part of Moldova where Russian troops are staying for many, many years. And these are the troops which Russia keeps there in order to start a war, against Moldova when the time is right. And the initial idea was to proceed to Transnistria, to unite Russian troops fighting in Ukraine with Russian troops staying in Transnistria, and then developing a war conflict in Moldova, similar to the conflict in Ukraine, and trying to take Moldova. Moldova, of course, is much weaker state than the Ukraine. So we will see Russia's attempt to proceed to Transnistria. We will see Russia's attempts to take Kiev again. We see the increased fighting in Donbass region now. Again, there is no indication that Russia plans to to stop this war or to end this war. And from Putin's points of view, the time which he's losing, of course, this is an indication that the war will take much longer. But from his point of view, since he is allowed to destroy Ukraine from the air, since the war is conducted on the territory of Ukraine, since Russia actually does not feel this war at all, except for those people who are killed, but Russia really does not care how many people are killed. Russia always loses in all wars, a lot of people, more than all other participants. And Putin personally doesn't really care how many Russians are killed. So from this point of view, he is ready to proceed with this war further and further and further. The only way the nature of this war would change if Ukrainians will start to get from the West offensive weapons. These are, fighters similar to F-16s.
So the only way the war would end, the way you see it, if the United States will speed up and increase the number of weapons supplied to Ukraine, right?
Well, this is happening. To be fair, the United States, not just the United States, everybody, all partners of Ukraine or those countries which help Ukraine, they are moving into right direction. They are moving into right direction again because there is no other way. So when RAND Corporation is offering not to be involved in this war,
they're not offering. They're not saying that. They're not saying that they do not want the United States to be involved. In fact, they have some suggestions as to more planned and actually greater involvement of the United States in war, just differently.
Well, then we would like to know how, because the only change which I would want to see at this point is, of course, conducting this war not as a defensive war, but as an offensive war. You see, so far, Ukrainians are getting from the West weapons which allow them to halt Russian aggression. But Ukrainians are not getting weapons which allow Ukraine to conduct offensive war against Russian Federation. They need airplanes like F-16. They need long-range missiles. The problem with Russia is that Russia is a huge state. We all know this. But at the same time, Russia is a state of one city, Moscow. And actually, what happens in the entire Russia does not play any role. The rest of the country could go under the water. No one would notice this. For Russia, only those events which are happening in Moscow are important. And for this reason, it's very unwise from military point of view to allow Russia to strike into Kiev, but not to allow Ukrainians to strike to Moscow. And that's what I think.
What do you think would happen if Ukrainians do strike Moscow?
Well, if Ukrainians do strike Moscow, they will win the war decisively, very quickly.
It will not make Russia more aggressive and actually use nuclear weapons?
Well, if Russia would like to use nuclear weapons or decides to use nuclear weapons, they would decide to use nuclear weapons. This is the major problem with this war if we are listening to Putin. If we are listening to Putin, what he is saying in this, look, guys, you are not able to allow us to lose the war, because if we know that we are losing the war, then in the last day of this war, which is already lost, we will use nuclear weapons. So if if we agree with this logic, then we should not allow Russia to lose the war. But the problem is that Russia is not able to win this war. This is the problem. So it's not actually up to us to
Actually, it lost the
decide.
war, as far as I'm concerned, before it started, because it made Ukraine into a truly independent, separate state.
That's another issue. This is a philosophical one, but the practical one is that even, I mean, it's wrong to use the word if, but even if Russia takes Ukraine, nothing changes. Really, nothing changes for Russia as well, because first of all, this is not going to be enough for Putin. Secondly, the price which Russia already paid, and is continuing to pay, is so tremendous that Russia would not be able to survive this as a defeat or victory. It doesn't really matter if the Russia is able to take Ukraine or not. Russia is still going to be destroyed by this war. It is already destroyed by this
So
war.
let's say Russia cannot take Ukraine, or if it does take Ukraine, it acquires a big cancer within it. But Ukraine cannot take Russia either.
Ukraine doesn't have to. That's precisely the point. There were many wars which Russia lost, where opponent never, ended in Moscow. I mean, the Crimean War was lost, and it has nothing to do with foreign troops occupying Russia. The
Crimean, Japanese,
Russian-Japanese
First World
War,
War,
correct?
etc. Yeah.
Correct. The Soviet-Afghan War was lost. There are some wars, yes, which demand occupation of a territory, like the case of Germany in 1945. But there is also a war which Japan lost in 1945, and this did not demand occupation of the entire territory. So there are different wars in the world, and this one does not demand Ukrainians fighting against Russia in Russia. That's not what we would have to see to end this war, but we will have to see Ukrainians firing against Moscow, because Moscow is the only city which plays a role in the entire state. All other cities, all other towns, all other villages might be, destroyed
So you
by the
think that
war
if
with
Ukraine
Ukraine.
has the ability to shoot, to drop some bombs on Moscow, it will lead to Ukrainian victory? Russia will give up?
Correct. That's precisely what's going to happen. And I tell you that actually all you need to destroy literally five objects in Moscow. It's Ostankino telecenter, which Russia conducts for propaganda. Which is very actively working in supporting the war. Lubyanka building, which is the headquarters of the FSB, Ministry of Defense building, Ministry of Foreign Affairs building, and State Duma building. Literally, you need to destroy 5 buildings in Moscow, so the Russia finally will feel the result of this war. And without this, this war will never end. So my point
Yuri,
is this.
I cannot agree with you on these points. I mean, I don't mind those buildings be destroyed. I don't think it will lead to Russia's capitulation. Quite the opposite. Right now, Russia is going through mobilization, and it will have 500,000, according to Ukrainian Minister of Defense and you, 500,000 Russian troops are taking Ukraine now. It can have 5 million Russian troops are taking Ukraine and defending Russia. Once Russian people feel that this is not just simply a war, but war for survival of Russia, and many of them already increasingly do feel, they're going to behave very differently.
Forget about Russian people. They are going to behave the way they're behaving now. This way, by the way they behave is not a great one. and it's a shame that Russian people behave this way. Russian people do not play any role in this war, except that they are used as a military force in Ukraine. They do not have the opinion. They do not have the right to express their opinion. That's why we do not hear about any opposition. Those people who were against this war, by the way, left Russia. They had many opportunity to do so. Even now, Russia still exists with open borders. So we should understand that those people who left in Russia basically do not care. We do not even claim that they actively support the war, not necessarily. They just do not care. This is very typical of Russia. This might be a result of terrible Soviet history and Stalin's terror, which killed tens of dozens of millions of the most active people. I mean, there are certain explanations why this is happening to Russia the way it's happening to Russia, but Russian army has no political power and never had. Russian people do not have voice in this war. So if you think that Russians care if Lubyanka building is destroyed or not, if we talk about people, no, they do not care. But those people who are in charge Russia, they do care. And if they know that this is going to be, dangerous for them, they will care. And that they will start to think if the war, which they started in
So
February,
basically, what
this will end in 1 month as a victorious war. Now they would know that there is no end to this war and there is no victory in this war. Otherwise, again, there would be no opportunity to end this war because Russia could conduct this war the way it is conducting it now indefinitely.
so what should the United States give Ukraine in order for Ukraine to win, as far as you are concerned?
Well, I'm not a military expert. I'm sure the Ukrainian military and Ukrainian government know what they need to have. The F-16 or similar planes were
But I
mentioned
have
many.
never heard of any Ukrainian saying that the goal of Ukrainians is to bomb those 5 buildings in Moscow. So
No,
I'm
the
asking
goal of
you, what weapons Ukrainians need in order to be able to do something like this?
Well, they're asking, by the way, for long-range missiles. The Ukrainian government is asking for those missiles. The Ukrainian government is asking for those
Well, I
missiles.
understand that the range is only 350 kilometers instead of
Oh,
80
no, 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 no,
kilometers.
no, no. I mean, it's very easy. I'm not a military expert. There are drones which might be sent to Moscow. It is possible. It is possible to destroy, to destroy particular buildings in particular
So
cities.
are you saying that this is the
Drones.
reason, what you just said, this is the reason that in Moscow, Putin now has anti-rocket or some systems that have been installed on the roofs of Ministry of Defense and in some force in order to protect against possible rocket attacks on Moscow?
Well, I actually started to mention the necessity of bombing Moscow probably a month ago. And yes, like two weeks ago, they started to install, particular weapon system in Moscow over the roofs of the building. And they're correct. I mean, they know that this is the only way to fight against them. They know that this is the only way to defeat Russia. They know this, and that's why they are positioning all those, defensive weapons in Moscow now, because they know that this is the way to win the war for Ukrainians and to lose the war for Russians.
So, but Ukraine now has some drones that actually can reach Moscow. I mean, they have these drones from Turkey that they're manufacturing and modifying them. They showed that they were able to reach airport, a military airport in on Volga River. So they should be able to reach Moscow as well. There's only 800 miles there from Ukraine.
Right. But then there is also a political decision which has to be taken by NATO, because so far Ukrainians are not allowed to use weapons which they receive from the West to strike against territories of Belarus and Russia. So far, this is the conditions under which Ukrainians are getting assistance. So this is a political decision of the United States, Germany, France, other allies, other members of NATO, which have to be made. But my point is this. My point is that from day number one, from 24th of February, everybody was thinking, was trying to find a way to stop this war. And this was, this was an honest desire. And I have, there was nothing wrong with President Macron calling Putin like every day or every week, offering him to start negotiations, because the idea was, the desire was to stop this war by any means, through capitulation of Ukraine if possible, through negotiations if possible, through surrendering of part of Ukrainian territory if possible. But we already, all those phases already behind. This was not happening. The only way to stop this war is through victory over Putin and his regime. And the only way to have this victory, to obtain this victory, is unfortunately for Russia to strike against Moscow. This is going to happen. The fact that I'm the only person who is saying about this does not mean that this would not take place. I was the only person in 2014 who was saying that Russia would invade Ukraine. Well, maybe not the only person, but I was in minority. So this is what I'm saying. It sounds too extreme, but it's not. But this is the cheapest way and quickest way to end this war.
But the authors of this REN report say that the highest priority, as far as they see, avoiding a long war and minimizing escalation risks. And by escalation risk, they mean nuclear exchange between Russia and the United States. And the United States should take steps that make an end to the conflict over the medium term. I do not know what they mean over medium term, maybe a year, more likely. So that is the strategy with regard to this war that the authors of this paper, RAND paper, advocate.
But there is no strategy. I'm sorry to say this, but there is nothing what they are offering. It's not up to the United States. It's not up to NATO to stop this war. It's up to Russia, but Russia doesn't want to stop this war. This is Russia which is escalating this war. This is Russia which is escalating rhetoric. This is Russia which is saying that they are fighting against NATO. It's not up to the United States. Up to the United States is to help or not to help Ukraine. This I agree. But the decision not to help Ukraine will not stop this war. This war will spread into other countries if United States would not help Ukraine. So if those people who were writing that particular report were interested in stopping the risk of spreading this war, then of course they should argue for a quicker victory over Russia, again, because we already passed those stages when everybody was planning to end this war through negotiations, right?
They don't believe that Ukraine can defeat Russia.
The fact that Ukraine cannot defeat Russia does not mean that Russia is able to win in Ukraine. This is precisely the point. Ukraine is not able to defeat Russia without assistance of NATO countries. This
But
is,
if
of
Russia
course,
takes Odessa, Black Sea coast, it will in many ways strangle Ukraine
no,
economically.
it will not. No, it will not. Russia could strangle Ukraine through Minsk agreements, which Russia had in 2014. This was the only way to strangle Ukraine. As we know now, after 11 months of war, Russia is not able to win the war militarily. This doesn't mean that Ukraine is able to win this war against Russia unless Ukraine would start to conduct this war the offensive way. Because again, so far Ukrainians are taking the blow inside their own territory, and this
An
is
offensive way that you means, first of all, the decision by the United States. And what I see in this report, I see that the resolution of the United States, of American public that deals with the issue, from right and left, is crumbling with regard to Ukraine. I mean, different people use different justifications, but I see that the support for Ukraine in this war in the United States is weakening. Take Tucker Carlson, take Trump, take on the left Democracy Now, this other leftist socialists, and on. It's crumbling. I do not see the resolution of the United States building up. And everything that you talk about in terms of victory for Ukraine over Russia depends on the United States to a large extent. No United States willingness to help Ukraine actively, to support to victory, Ukraine is not going to win.
Except that the United States has no choice but to help Ukraine. And the United States is doing this for the United States and not for Ukraine. And this is a major point.
Could you please state it so people, that listen, watch this, that they would understand that this is not what this writers of this report mean. They feel, that the United States is just helping Ukraine, and the United States is going to. In my mind, you were right. The last conversation we had, that this is the beginning of Third World War. And Third World War that can end with nuclear exchange and devastation, destruction of humanity.
Again, nuclear aspect of this war is a kind of separate topic, because again, here everything depends on the desire or readiness of the Russian government to use nuclear weapons. But the only way to prevent this is to change the government and regime in Russia. And the only way to change this government and regime in Russia is to strike into Moscow. And this is going to happen.
So you say Ukraine strikes Moscow and Moscow just sits quietly and does not bomb the hell out of Ukraine?
Oh, they're doing this every day anyway.
They could do it much more extensively.
No, they cannot. No, they cannot. If they would do this, they would not conduct this war for 11 months. They would not lose 100,000 Russian troops in Ukraine. Trust me, they're doing as much as they're able to do. It's all bluff. The talk that, as Putin was saying every time, oh, we did not start the war yet. You will see us when we really will start to fight. They really started to fight on 24th of February. and they're doing as much as possible to win this war as quickly as possible, and they're not able to do this, and they will not able to do this even if they use nuclear weapons against Ukraine. This is the tragic irony, but that's how it is. They are not able to win this war, but our problem is not that they're not able to win this war. I mean, it's good, but this is not the end of our problems. Our problem is that we need them to lose this war. And in order to lose Russia, to lose this war, and Russia changing its government, and Russia's existing without current regime which Putin was building since 2000, the only way to do this is to win this war against Russia. The only way to win this war against Russia is give Ukrainians, offensive weapons, including long-range missiles, and permission to fight into Russia and into Belarus. By the way, the liberation of Belarus is probably more important, I would argue, than a liberation of Donbass or Crimea, from the point of view of preventing the spread of this war. Again, and if those people in rank preparation...
Are you saying that Ukrainian troops should enter Belarus?
They do not need to use Ukrainian troops for this. There are Belarusian troops which are now fighting in Ukraine against the Russian aggression.
But there's very few of them. It's nothing.
Oh, no, they're not very few. The only reason there are few of them is because Ukrainians are not interested in this point in increasing the amount of Belarusian troops fighting in Ukraine. There were no attempts to form a division, for example, on the ground of those battalions which are fighting so far. But Lukashenko is not very popular in Belarus. Everyone knows this. His regime is very weak. It's a clear case of dictatorship. And the moment first Belarusian troops from Ukraine would be moved to Belarus to find, the regime in Belarus would collapse. And there is nothing wrong, by the way, in conducting the war this way, because we do know, for example, that during the Second World War, the liberation of Germany from Nazism started with, British troops landing in Italy, and American and British troops landing in France. It started in Europe not with sending troops to Germany. It started in Europe with sending troops to Italy and France. So there is nothing wrong in taking Belarus under NATO's control first, because Belarus is the most important ground, number one, for nuclear strikes against Europe, and number two, for further invasion of Russian troops into Eastern Europe. So again, it's a complicated situation. I do not want to say that the situation is very simple, but if we really want to end this war, if we really want to if we do not want to spread this conflict into other countries, including Poland and the Baltic states, if we would like to avoid nuclear confrontation, then we need to strike against Moscow.
Strike against. So, as I said, I do not believe striking against Moscow would lead to a defeat of Russia. But let's say it does lead to a defeat of Russia. In your mind, what does it mean? What would Russia become right after the defeat? I don't agree with you in any of those. On any of those points, but
what in your mind? I'm usually in minority. This is
that's good, and that's why we invited you, because you are original thinker.
Position for me. And you mentioned two books, Blowing Up Russia. Blowing Up Russia was a book about FSB being involved in September terrorist acts in Russia in '99, and at that time just two people, me and Litvinenko, were believing that the FSB was behind those explosions. Now, actually, this is accepted version of the events. The book Blowing Up Ukraine, which you
Just to clarify for our listeners, the explosion you are referring to is the explosion of the building, multi-apartment building that Putin's people organized in order to create the reason to go with war against Chechnya, right?
Correct. This is September of 99, when 300 people were killed during the major terrorist act in Russia those days. And
organized by FSB,
organized
KGB, by Putin's
FSB.
people.
Correct. Mm-hmm. And this allowed Putin to start the second Chechen war and to present himself as a strong leader and to win elections. And the second book, Blowing Up Ukraine, actually is about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but this book was written in 2015. And in 2015, it was published in Ukraine, in Russian and Ukrainian, and in Poland.
By the way, I want to say, I've read this book. It's a very good book, although it's written before Russian invasion of Ukraine. It gives a very good description of why Russia is doing things that Russia is doing, and I would highly recommend to anybody who is interested in the topic to go to Amazon. We'll have the link below and purchase this book.
So once again, to be in minority is a comfortable position for me. But if we think about Russia losing this war, the best way for us, for Russia to lose this war, if there would be forces in Russia who would be able to take down Putin and those people who are ruling Russia today. And again, this might happen only if Russia feels the defeat, but Russia could feel the defeat only if Moscow is under attack. There is no other way Russia would feel the defeat. This is the irony. Russia is a huge country and Ukraine is not, by the way. But you were asking what we should expect after the defeat of Russia. I think all we need to do is to be sure that those people who would rule Russia or govern in Russia after this war would be people who would understand that the major enemy of Russia is Putin and the FSB, the Russian state securities. So if we have people who would replace Putin, and those people would
who those people may be.
Who are people? Like some of them are in prison today. Some of them are in opposition, living in Russia. Some of them are abroad. There are a lot of people who are ready. Trust me, there are a lot of people who are ready to govern Russia, to become government of Russia. But I'm just explaining you what kind of people we should see, because if we just see Patrushev instead of Putin, nothing would change. If we see Medvedev instead of Putin, nothing will change.
But I do not see anybody else is there in position of power or close to power to be able to do anything that you want them to do.
Well, I'm sure that prior to 9th of May 1945, we did not see any Germans who would be ready.
But there was Soviet army that was bombing the hell out of them and defeated them.
Precisely. And
so are you saying that Ukrainians are going to be marching through Red Square?
No. I would argue even that Ukrainians should not cross the border. But Ukrainians...
But bomb Moscow, not cross the border, but bomb Moscow.
Correct. But Ukrainians should have ability to destroy enemy from the air. That's what I would argue for. I do not want a single Ukrainian to be killed fighting Russian troops inside Russia. I think this would be a wrong way to conduct this
Why? I
war.
mean, you say that they should be bombing Moscow, but you do not want them to cross the border. What? I don't see the.
They do not need to cross the border. They do not have any plans to take Russian territory under its control. All they need is to destroy the enemy. And in order to destroy the enemy in contemporary war, you do not need to cross the border.
Yeah, the Palestinian terrorists from Gaza bomb Israel all the time. It does not lead to any change in government.
Well, it's a different problem, and we may discuss it.
Bombing somebody in Moscow, I don't believe is going to do anything. In any case, so we do not know. I personally, agree with your position with regard to this paper. I do not know why this paper has been produced by Iran Corporation. I think this is a wrong turn. I believe, as you, that United States should, in fact, dramatically increase supply of armaments to Ukraine, and Ukraine has the ability to really kick the butts of Russia in Ukraine. But further than that, I do not see. My feeling is that there is going to be some armistice. I do not know if there's going to be a peace agreement, but some end of military actions that will lead to, like they said in this paper, 20% of Ukraine is going to be gone, is going to be part of Russia. Ukraine is
not going to be able to get the most stupid. I think this is the most ridiculous and stupid approach I ever seen.
Okay, I'm stupid.
No, I do not want to say that you're stupid. You are quoting the report of the Iran Corporation. If they say
this is what they say,
Ukraine should surrender 20% of the territory to Russia, and if they sincerely hope that this would end the conflict which Putin started with Europe on 24th of February 22, this is the most idiotic statement I ever seen.
Okay, but there is more to it. On one hand, they say that there should be a peace agreement that guarantees Ukrainian neutrality. On the other hand, they said that the United States should unilaterally sign agreement with Ukraine, guaranteeing Ukraine's further prevention from any aggression on the part of Russia. I don't understand what they mean. On one hand, neutrality, and the other is going to be a military ally, directly military ally of United States.
Well, you see, if this text would be published in national interest of Dmitry Simes, who is a Russian agent, I would understand entirely what's happening. I really do not know why this kind of text came out of Iran Corporation. I think this, from any point of view, this this text is wrong from factual point of view, from political point of view, from historical point of view. Again, I do not know who wrote this, who signed it, why it was written, who was, initiating this kind of paper and for what reason. But once again, this war is not going to end through surrounding partial territories of Ukraine to Russia. This is not going to happen. And if people who are offering this sincerely hoping that this would satisfy Putin and this would end all problems which Europe has with the current Russian government, they are wrong. The way Europeans were wrong when they were trying to deal with Hitler through giving him part of territories of other European states.
So,
This never led to peace. This kind of policy never led to peace and never ended with peace. It's only ended with a major war. So the only way to prevent major war in Europe, which is developing right now, is to win in Ukraine, not to surrender Ukraine, not to force Ukraine into capitulation. And by the way, this already did not happen. If we would discuss this, if this article would appear on the 25th of February or in the first days of March, there would be nothing wrong with this article. It would be a suggestion to end this war through, well, yeah, forcing Ukrainians to pay with their territory for peace. Again, there would be nothing wrong with this article if it would appear at the end of February or in March of 22. But when this article is published, if this article, when this article is published now, everything is wrong with this article because we are beyond all those discussions. This war already did not end with capitulation of Ukraine. This war already did not end with negotiations with Putin, because of Putin's fault, or because of Ukrainians' fault, or because both sides were not ready to end this war through negotiations, right? But this already did not happen. So I do not really see any reason to analyze events which already did not happen. They're behind. We have to see further. We have to think again how to end this war as quickly as possible. And at this point, I think it's clear to everybody, including Germany, including France, including the United States, that the only way to win this war is to defeat Russian Federation. And this will bring the end to the problem the way the problem of Nazi Germany was ended in May of 45.
I agree with you, to defeat Russia, absolutely. Question is how. You say bombing 5 buildings in Moscow, I say it makes no difference whatsoever. But if you mean to defeat, to drive into exhaustion, to defeat it in eastern Ukraine, to push it out, I'll go along with that.
If Russia is pushed out, this by itself would not mean the defeat. This might mean only the temporary activity,
yeah.
right? So we need to change regime in Russia. We need to force current Russian government.
What I mean is defeat on a battlefield in Ukraine would cause more Russians, similar to the way it happened in 1905 with regard to Japanese war, to reevaluate their attitude toward Russian government and be against it. And then there could be possibility of change.
Well, the quickest way is to bomb Moscow.
Okay. I hope you talk to Zelensky about it and he's readying some missiles. But I don't believe that is the way. But you have your opinion. In any case, Yuri, thank you very, very much for your time and for your expertise. And once again, I strongly suggest that people that watch us buy your books, and especially this book, Blowing Up Ukraine. And not so much for coverage of what's going on in Ukraine now, but more importantly, for the dynamics of Russian intentions in the war that were building up and created before the war, because that's what book is all about. Yuri, thank you very much, and hope
Thank
to
you
talk
very
to you
much.
one day soon again. Bye.
Bye.